Alright, and we are going live. We are live once again. How you do, everybody? I hope everybody had a really good Sunday night. I hope everybody has getting through this quarantine just well. It's been crazy, hasn't it? And if you watch WrestleMania, that was... Well, it wasn't... I wouldn't call it the best WrestleMania of all time, but I would call it definitely the best with the circumstances that we were up against right now. So here we are, night 4. Gonna continue with read of The Hobbit. I do not have Captain Rob or Mick or even the Gimli dog who's not with me, but that's alright. I'm gonna go ahead and jump back into it. Let's see, we left off where Bilbo just ran into the 3 trolls, decided he needed to try and steal something from them, and Tolkien wrote the dialogue for the trolls exactly how they speak, so it's really tricky. It is very, very tricky. And I also noticed that in some previous airing that my microphone wasn't picking me up very much, so I'm going to try to remember to go right for the mic, right to you. And, go ahead and ask questions, because I see we got one person watching. That's cool. All right, so let's jump right into it. Let's see. The name of the trolls were Bert, Tom, and I thought it was Bill, but they're going by William in the book. So, okay, let's go with it. All right. Bilbo had knew it. He had read a good many things he had never seen or done. He was very much alarmed as well as disgusted. He wished himself 100 miles away, and yet somehow he could not go straight back to Thorin and company empty-handed. So he stood and hesitated in the shadows. Of the various burglarious proceedings he had heard of, picking the troll's pockets seemed the least difficult, so at least he crept up a tree just behind William. Bert and Tom went off to the barrel. William was having another drink. William was having another drink. Then Bilbo picked up the courage and put his little hand in William's enormous pocket. There was a purse in it, as big as a bag to Bilbo. Ha! He thought, as he warming up to his new work as he lifted carefully out. This is a beginning. It was. Trolls' purses are the mischief, and this was no exception. Who are you? It squeaked as it left the pocket, and William turned around and once and grabbed Bilbo by the neck before he could duck behind the tree. Blimey, Bert, look at what I've copped, said William. What is it? Said the others, coming up. Lummy if I know. Where are ye? Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit, said poor Bilbo, shaking all over and wondering how to make owl noises before they throttled him. A hobbit, said the bit, startled. Trolls are slow in the uptake and mighty suspicious about anything new to them. What's a hobbit got to do with my pocket anyway? Said William. And can you cook 'em? Said Tom. You can try, said Bert, picking up a skewer. He wouldn't make above a mouthful, said William, who has already had a fine supper. Not when he was skinned and boned finally. Perhaps there are more like him around a bit and we can make a pie, said Bert. Here you are. Are there any more of your sort of sneaking in these here woods, you nasty little rabbit? As he looked at the hobbit's furry feet, and he picked him up by the toes and shook him. Yes, lots, said Bilbo, before he remembered not to give away his friends. No, not at all, not one, he said, immediately afterwards. What do you mean? Said Bert, holding him right away by the hair this time. What I say, said Bilbo, gasping, and please don't cook me, kind sirs. I am a good cook myself, and cook better than I cook. And cook better than I could be cooked. If you could see what I mean. I'll cook beautifully for you, perhaps beautiful breakfast for you, if you only give me half of supper. Poor little blighter, said William. He's already had as much a supper as he could hold. Also, he had had lots of beer. Poor little blighter, let him go. Not till he has what he means by lots and none at all, said Bert. I don't want to have me throat cut in me sleep. Holds his toes by the fire till he talks. I won't have it, said William. I caught him anyway. You're a fat fool, William, said Bert. As I've always afore this evening. You can tell I'm giving all three of them the same voice. It's just easier that way. And you're lout. And I won't take that from you, Bill Huggins, said Bert as he puts his fist in William's eye. Then there was a gorgeous row. Bilbo had just enough wits left when Bert dropped him to the ground to scramble out of the way of their feet before they were fighting like dogs and calling one another all sorts of spectacularly true and appreciated names in very loud voices. Soon they were locked in each other's arms and rolling nearly into the fire, kicking and thumping, while Tom whacked at both of them with a branch to bring them to their senses. And that, of course, only made them madder than ever. That would have been the time for Bilbo to have left, but his poor little feet had been very squashed in Bert's big paw, and he had no breath in his body, and his head was going round, so there he lay, while panting outside the circle of firelight. Right in the middle of the fight came Balin. The dwarves heard noises from the distance, and after waiting for some time to come back, or to hoot like an owl, they started off one by one to creep towards the light as quietly as they could. No sooner did Tom see Balin come up into the light than he gave an awful howl. Trolls simply detest the very sight of dwarves, uncooked. Bert and Bill... I almost started reading like the trolls. Bert and Bill stopped fighting immediately, and a sack. Tom, quick, they said, before Balin, who was wondering what all the commotion Bilbo was, knew what was happening. A sack was over his head, and he was down. There's more to come yet, said Tom, or I mighty mistook. None and lots at all it is. No burrow hobbits, but lots of here dwarves, and that's about the shape of it. I reckon you're right, said Bert, and we'd best get out of the light. And so they did. With sacks in their hands, and they used for carrying off mutton and other plunder, they waited in the shadows. As each dwarf came up and looked at the fire and spilled jugs and gnawed mutton, in surprise, pop! Went a nasty, smelly sack over their head, and he was down. Soon Dwalin lay by Balin, and Fili and Kili together, and Nori, Dori, and Ori all in one heap. Oin, Gloin, and Bifur, Bofer, and Bomber piled up uncomfortably near the fire. That'll teach him, said Tom, for Bifur and Bomber Bifur and Bomber had given a lot of trouble and fought like mad, as dwarves will when they're cornered. Thorin came last, and he was not cut unawares. He came expecting mischief and did not see his friend's legs sticking out of sacks to tell him that things were not well. He stood outside in the shadow some way off and said, What's all this trouble? Who has been knocking my people out? It's trolls, said Bilbo from behind a tree. They had forgotten all about him. They're hiding in the bushes with sacks, he said. Oh, are they? Said Thorin. And he jumped forward into the fire, and before they could leap on him, he caught up a big branch, all on fire on one end, and Bert got that end in his eye before he could step aside. That put him out of the battle for a bit. Bilbo did his best. He caught hold of Tom's leg, as well as he could. It was thick as a young tree trunk, but he was spinning into the top of some bushes, when Tom kicked the sparks up in Thorin's face. Tom got the branch in his teeth for that, and lost one of the front ones. Oh, his teeth. It made him howl, I can tell you, but just at that moment, William came up behind and popped a sack right over Thorin's head and down to his toes. And so the fight ended. A nice pickle they were all in now, all neatly tied up in sacks, with 3 angry, hungry trolls, and 2 with burns and bashes to remember, sitting by them, arguing whether they should roast them slowly, or mince them fine and boil them, or just sit on them one at a time and squash them into jelly. Bilbo up in a bush, with his clothes and his skin torn, up in a bush with with his clothes and his skin torn, not daring to move for fear they should hear him. It was just then Gandalf came back. But no one saw him. The trolls just decided to roast the dwarves now and eat them later. That was Bert's idea, and after a lot of argument, they had all agreed to it. "No good roasting them now, it'll take all night," said a voice. Bert thought it was William's. So did I. "Don't start the argument all over again, Bill," he said, "or we will take all night." "Who's arguing?" said Bill, who thought it was Bert that had spoke. "You are," said Bert. "You're a liar," said William. So the argument began all over again. In the end, they decided to mince them fine and boil them. So they got a great black pot, and they took out their knives. "No good boiling 'em. We ain't got no water, and it's a long way to the well and all," said a voice. Bert and William thought it was Tom's. "Shut up," said they, "or we'll never have done, and ye all catch your water yourselves if you say any more." "Shut up yourselves," said Tom, who thought it was William's voice. "Who's arguing but you? I'd like to know." "You're a booby," said William. "Booby yourself," said Tom. I love that line. And so the argument began all over again and went on to hotter than ever until I can't ditch the troll voice. I like doing it. It is fun. So the argument began all over again and went on hotter than ever until they had decided to sit on the sacks one at a time and squash them and boil them next time. "Who shall we sit on first?" said the voice. "Better sit on the last fellow first," said Bert, whose eye had been damaged by Thorin. He thought Tom was talking. "Don't talk to yourself," said Tom. "But if you wants to sit on the last one, sit on him. Which is he?" "The one with the yellow stockings," said Bert. "Nonsense, the one with the gray stockings," said a voice like William's. "I made sure it was yellow," said Bert. "Yellow it is," said William. "Then what did you say for the gray one?" said Bert. "I never did. Tom said it." "Then I never did," said Tom. "It was you." 2-1, shut your mouth," said Bert. "Who are you talking to?" said William. "Now stop it," said Tom and Bert together. "The night's getting on and dawn comes early. Let's get on with it." "Dawn takes you and be stoned to you," said a voice that sounded like William's, but it wasn't. For just at that moment, the light came over the hill, and there was a mighty twitter of the branches. William never spoke. He stood and turned to the stone, and he stopped. Bert and Tom were stuck like rocks as they looked at him, and they're standing to this day all alone unless the birds perch on them, for trolls, as you probably know, must be underground before dawn, or they go back to the stuff of the mountains that they were made of, and never more again. That is exactly what happened to Bert, Tom, and William. "Excellent," said Gandalf, as he stepped from behind a tree and helped Bilbo to climb down out of the thorn brush. Then Bilbo understood. It was the wizard's voice that had kept the trolls bickering and quarreling until the light came and made an end of them. The next thing was to untie the sacks and let out the dwarves. They nearly suffocated and were very annoyed. They had not all enjoyed lying there listening to the trolls making plans for roasting them and squashing them and mincing them. They had to hear Bilbo's account of what happened to him from him twice over before they were satisfied. "Silly time to go practicing pinching and pocket picking," said Bulmer, "when what we wanted was fire and food." "And that's just what you wouldn't have gotten, all those strange fellows without a struggle in any case," said Gandalf. I didn't use Gandalf's voice, oh well. "Anyhow, you are all wasting time. Don't realize that the trolls must have had a cave or a hole dug somewhere near to hide in from the sun. We must look for it." They searched about and found the marks of trolls' stony boots going away from the trees. They followed the tracks up the hill, then hidden by bushes they came on a big door of stone leading by a cave. But they couldn't open it, not that they all pushed while Gandalf tried various incantations. "Would this be any good?" said Bilbo when they were tired and angry. "I found it on the ground where the trolls had their fight." He held out a largish key. No doubt William had thought it was very small and secret. It must have fallen out of his pocket, very luckily, before he was turned to stone. Why on earth didn't you mention it before? They cried. Gandalf grabbed it and fitted it in the keyhole. Then the stone door swung back with one big push, and they all went inside. There were bones on the floor and a nasty smell in the air, but that was a good deal of food jumbled carelessly on shelves and on the ground, among an untidy litter of plunder, of all sorts of brass buttons, the pots full of gold standing in the corner. There were lots of clothes, too, hanging on the walls. Too small for trolls. I'm afraid they belonged to victims. And among them were several swords of various makes, shapes, and sizes. Two caught their eyes particularly because they were beautiful scabbards and jeweled hilts. Gandalf and Thorin each took one of these, and Bilbo took a knife in a leather sheath. It would have made only a tiny pocket knife for a troll, but as good as a sword for the Hobbit. You know what sword that is? Does anyone remember the names of the other two swords that Thorin and Gandalf took? Because that'd be impressive, because I don't remember what Thorin's sword was called. It did have a name, though. Oh, yes, I do. I do remember what it is now. These look like good blades. These look like good blades, said the wizard, half drawing them and looking at them curiously. They were not made by any troll nor any smith among men in these parts and days. But when we can read the runes on them, we shall know more about them. Let's get them out of this horrible smell, said Philly. So they carried out the pots of coins and food as such as untouched as looked fit to eat. Also 1 barrel of ale, which was still full. Okay, yeah, totally understand that one. By the time they felt like breakfast and very hungry, they did not turn their noses up at what they had got from the troll's larder. Their own provisions were very scanty. Now they had bread and cheese and plenty of ale and bacon to toast in the embers of the fire. After that, they slept, for their night had been disrupted, and they did nothing more until the afternoon. Then they brought up their ponies and carried away the pots of gold and buried them in a secret not far from the track by the river, putting a great many spells over them, just in case they ever had a chance to come back and recover them. When that was done, they all mounted once more and jogged along the path towards the east. "Where did you go, if I may ask?" said Thorin to Gandalf as they rode along. "To look ahead," said he. "And what brought you back in the nick of time?" "Looking behind," he said. "Exactly," said Thorin. "But could you be more plain?" "I went to spy out our road. It will soon become dangerous and difficult. Also, I was anxious about replenishing our small stock of provisions. I had not gone very far, however, when I had met a couple of friends of mine from Rivendell." "Where's that?" asked Bilbo. "Don't interrupt," said Gandalf. "You will get there in a few days now, if we're lucky, and find out all about it. As I was saying, I met 2 of Elrond's people. They were hurrying along for fear of the trolls. It was they who told me 3 of them had come down from the mountains and settled in the woods, not far from the road. They had frightened everyone away in the district, and they waylaid strangers. I immediately had a feeling that I was wanted back. Looking behind, I saw a fire in the distance and made for it. So now you know. Please be more careful next time, or we shall never get anywhere." "Thank you," said Thorin. All right, that's chapter 2. How y'all liking it so far? All 3 of you who have tuned in. That's all right. I'm not doing this for views, doing it for myself. All right, chapter 3, A Short Rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and the horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass. But there was not much in their bags, even with what they had gotten from the trolls. One morning they forded over a river at a wide, shallow place, full of the noise of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountain had marched down very near to them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and drear it looked. Through there were patches of sunlight. On the brown sides and behind the shoulders of the tips a snow-peak gleamed. "Is that the mountain?" asked Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He had never seen a thing that big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That's only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and we must have got through it, or over, or under those somehow, because we can come into Wilderland beyond. It is a deal of the way from the other side of them to the Lonely Mountain in the east, where Smaug lies on our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo, just as if that moment he felt more tired than ever, remembering feeling before. He was thinking once again of the comfortable chair before his fire in his favorite sitting room, in his hobbit hole, and in the kettle singing. Not for the last time. Now Gandalf led the way. "We must not miss the road, or we shall be done for," he said. "We need food, for one thing, and rest, for reasonable safety. Also, it is very necessary to tackle the Misty Mountains by the proper path, or else you will get lost in them and have to come back and start at the very beginning again, if you ever get back at all." They asked him where he was making for, and he answered, "You are come to the very edge of the wild, as some of you may know. Hidden elsewhere ahead of us, in the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives in the last homely house. I sent a message by my friends, and we are expected." That sounded nice and comforting, but they had not got there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. They seemed to be no trees and no valleys and no hills to break the ground in front of them. Only one vast slope, slowly going up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain. A wide land of color and heather from crumbling rock, which patches of slashes of green and moss green showing where the water might be. Doing good. Morning passed. Afternoon came. And in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they saw now that the house might be hidden amongst where between them and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides, that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down, surprised to see trees below them and running water at the bottom. They were the gullies that they could almost leap over, but very deep with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines, and one could neither jump nor climb into. There were bogs, some of them from green, pleasant places to look at, with flowers growing bright and tall. But a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never come out again. It was indeed a much wilder land for the ford to the mountains than either of you would have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked with white stones, some of which were small and others were half covered with moss or heather. Altogether, it was a very slow business, following the track, even guided by Gandalf, who seemed to know his way around pretty well. His head and his beard waggled his way this and that, and he looked for the stones, and they followed his lead, but they seemed no nearer to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had gone long ago, and it seemed supper time soon would do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over the roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here at last!" he called, and the others gathered around him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side of the water. Bilbo never forgot the way he slithered and slipped in the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of pine trees made him drowsy, so that every now and again he nodded and nearly fell off, or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was comfortable feeling in the twilight. Oh God, there's more singing. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came to the length of an open glade not far above the banks of the stream. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Just then, there was a burst of song, like laughter in the trees. I don't know this song, so I'm just going to read the lyrics. Oh, what are you doing, and where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing. The river is flowing. Oh, tra-la-la-la-lay, here down in the valley. That's a sloppy rhyme. Oh, what are you seeking, and where are you making? The twigs are reeking, the Bangkoks are baking. Oh, tree-lee-lee-lolly, the valley is jolly, ha-ha. What kind of pipeweed were you smoking there, Tolkien? And you need a share. Oh, will you be staying? Oh, will you be flying? Your ponies are straying. The daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, and listen and hark till the end of the dark to our tune. Ha ha. Hee hee ho ho, I wish to come and take me away. Alright. No more singing, hopefully. So they laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty fair nonsense, I dare say, to think of it. Not that they would ever care, that they would only laugh at all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them, and the darkness deepened. He loved elves, though he seldom met them. But he was a little frightened of them, too. Dwarves don't get along well with them. Even decent enough dwarves like Thorin and his friends think them foolish. Which is a very foolish thing to think. Or get annoyed with them. For the elves tease them and laugh at them, and most just look at their beards. Well, well, said a voice. Just look. Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony, my dear. Isn't it delicious? Most astonishing wonderful. Then off they went into another song, oh God, as ridiculous as the one I have written down in full. At last a tall young one came out from the trees and bowed to Gandalf and Thorin. Welcome to the valley, he said. Thank you, said Thorin, a bit gruffly, but Gandalf was already off his horse and among the elves, talking merrily with them. You are a little out of your way, said the elf. That is, if you are making the only path across the water and to the house beyond. We will set you right, but you had the best get on foot until you are over the bridge. Are you going to stay a bit and sing with us? Or will you go straight on? Supper is prepared over there, he said. I can smell the wood fires for the cooking. Okay, I should probably keep that closer. Tired as he was, Bilbo would have just liked to stay a while. Elvish singing is not a thing to miss. In June, under the stars, not if you care for such things. Also, he would have liked to have had a few private words with these people that seemed to know the names of all about him, although he had never met them before. He thought their opinion of his adventure might be interesting. Elves know a lot, and are wondrous folk for news, and know what is going on among the people of the land, as quick as water flows, or quicker. But as the dwarves were all for supper as soon as possible just then, and would not stay, on they all went, leading their ponies till they were brought to a good path, and so at last to the very brink of the river. It was flowing fast and noisily, as mountain streams do for a summer evening. When sun had been all day on the snow far up above, there was only a narrow bridge of stone without a parapet, as narrow as a pony could well walk on. And over that they had to go, slow and careful, one by one, each leading his pony by the bridle. The elves had brought bright lanterns to the shore, and sang a merry song as the party went across. Oh boy. Don't dip your beard in the foam, father, they cried to Thorin, who had been bent almost onto his hands and knees. It is long enough without watering it. Mind Bilbo doesn't eat all the cakes, they called. He is too fat to get through keyholes yet. Hush, hush, good people, and good night, said Gandalf, who came last. Valleys have ears, and some elves have over merry tongues. Good night. And so at last they came to the last homely house, and found its doors flung wide open. Alright, that's going to do it for 30 minutes there. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying reading. I'm glad the trolls portion is done with, because that was really tricky to read. And I really hope there's no more singing, but knowing me, there is. So guys, again, thanks for tuning in. I hope you tune in. I'm going to try and do this every single night this week. Yeah, we're going to give it a shot. Just see how we go. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Thank you so much. Yeah, I want to end.